Hello, gentlemen and ladies. I'm Gavin Brown. I'm doing my speech today for you guys about bass fishing and how it changes throughout the year and how your techniques change. My first slide here for everybody is how temperature affects bass, because that's really the everything that has to do with bass, their movement, how they feed, what they feed on, is 90% of it is all because of temperature. And so you have a winter season, a spring season, a summer season, and a fall season that are all completely different in fishing. I mean, winter and summer can kind of collide in some categories, but other than that, they are completely different. And there's also 4 subcategories, if you want to talk about it, 4 transition periods: winter to spring, spring to summer, summer to fall, and fall to winter. Those also bring on another load of challenges because you have some fish that are still in the last season in those positions and that feeding pattern. You have fish that are kind of transferring, then you have fish that are in the new feeding pattern. So a lot of times in those times it's pretty hard to catch fish just because they're going to be so spread out. The seasons are determined by these kind of simple water temperatures. 33 or really anything under 3, since we are in an area where the lakes will freeze and get a little bit below that even without freezing. 33 to 45 is your average winter temps, and that's really anywhere in the country, not just here. Your 45 to 65 is your spring temps, and that 45 is where they start that transition period, and then once it gets to about 50, they're really just in the heat of spring. Your summer temps are 65 to 85. Again, that 65 is where the transfer starts happening, and once it gets up to 85, they actually kind of get a little more lethargic when it's that warm. Now, Coeur d'Alene itself, I guess it'd be over here. Coeur d'Alene itself doesn't get that warm, but when you go up to Chain Lakes and get to the shallower, murkier lakes, they will tip the scales at 85-degree water, and those fish are usually in inches of water at that time. And 65 to 45 is where it kind of falls back off into fall, and then the whole thing repeats. 35 to 45 is back down to winter, and I mean, it just kind of goes around. The seasons change where you bass fish significantly. Whether you're going to be on the main lake or if you're going to be somewhere back at a cove or even up a chain lake like our instance, where you can be fishing Maine Coeur d'Alene, or you can run up a river and go to small subsection lakes. Winter pushes the fish pretty deep for feeding to kind of start at the beginning of our scale. And you can kind of see like winter down here on this diagram, you're in that 20 foot of water, and even here with the deeper lakes, and this is depicting largemouth patterns with definitely resemble smallmouth patterns, but smallmouth do tend to be a little deeper in the winter. Other than that, they're basically the same. But that 20-foot mark is where they're going to be deep, they're going to be lethargic, schooled up, kind of looking for easy bait, small bait. They don't have to move much to conserve all their body heat, so they don't have to feed or really do much during the winter. Now the spring brings the fish pretty shallow, and it's a pretty drastic change. And this is kind of showing that transition period. So you go from winter to your transition period, which is actually the pre-spawn, because spring is their spawning time, which is another reason they go so shallow, because they want to spawn in very shallow water. So they kind of have this pre-spawn where they start getting up shallow. And this transition from pre-spawn to spawn is where you get the most feeding activity and the most aggressive bass, because they're feeding up to then be able to protect the beds or make the beds if it's the female. And they get up to, like I said, inches of water in this time, all the way back down to 5 foot of water. And they're going to be on kind of more gravelly areas towards that time. And typically all year round, other than the summer, you'll find them on gravel and rocks. But during the summer, the grass is their best spot, just because in the summer it's kind of their go-to temperature. So they'd rather just be in a spot where they can ambush other fish and prey rather than trying to cling to warmer heat. The seasons change a lot your technique as well. And your technique really is dictated by depth, where you're at, what you're fishing, kind of like what they're holding to. But there's also one more factor that plays into the technique category, and is also the water clarity. So water, quick little overview on that is really clear water, you want to use something white, lighter colored, more natural. And then dirty water, you want to use something unnatural, like a black or a purple or blue, something like that. But the baits are pretty well depicted in this cartoon scheme of things here. The spring really brings the aggressive bass. Like I was saying, they're trying to feed up and get all the food they can for the spawn. And so they tend to be very aggressive, trying to get that big meal and stock up. And you can see you've got your more aggressive, flashy baits, your bigger in profile baits, and something that's more to kind of piss the fish off. Summer, you want to look down, you want to look around and kind of slow down for some fish. Other fish you speed up, and you're using topwater baits and larger baits like it's depicting here, a bigger glide bait or something like that, where they're looking for one big meal, so then they don't really have to do much, which tends to be your larger fish. But in the summer, it's also one of those periods where you can catch them still in inches of water on a fast-moving chatterbait or a jig or even a frog, where they'll come up and take it off the top of the water. Now the fall, the fish do begin to feed a little more going into winter, but they're feeding on more semi-aggressive baits and finesse baits, something that's a little lower profile, not to really piss them off, but they're just looking to gorge themselves on food. So you're looking at these more realistic baits, higher hookup baits, because they'll eat a lot of different baits, something that you're going to get a good hookup ratio on around there, and that's why you don't see a chatterbait or anything in there. And winter is a time where they really slow down, and you don't really catch very many fish, just because they're so slow and lethargic. And so you're using these more vertical style baits where you can get on top of the fish and really just get it in their face, because they won't eat it if it's just not readily accessible, because they don't really need to eat since they don't move. And so I mean, everything that's been said here has been something that I've learned on my own, or learned from what I've read online and done my own research, just because I'm kind of the first person in my family that started all this bass fishing stuff. And I really like to look back at the Major League Fishing pages. They do a really good job. You also can look at Pelican.com, which is one of the largest fishing blogs in the country. That's something that I always refer to, even when I'm on the water searching for stuff. And another guy is Mike Cork with PartSelect.com, is one of the local pros in the area. And so I read a lot of his stuff to kind of determine about this lake and a lot of these patterns, as well as what I've learned from him and his research with using graphs and stuff like that. And thank you guys all for coming to my speech today.
Questions? Anybody have questions?
Any questions? Question.
What is the number one thing you love about bass fishing?
Number one thing I love about bass fishing is it's something that you can't, like, you can always strive to be the best at it, but you're never gonna, like, there's always a part of luck with everything that comes to bass fishing. Although you can work to be a better bass fisherman, but there's always that area of luck that it's like someone that put their entire life into it. I could go out and beat them with my 6 years of knowledge, and I could still beat them in a tournament. So it's something that's not just skill based. There is some luck in there where a low level contender can beat high level contenders and be a high level contender very soon.
What? Okay.
Any other questions? Mikey?
Who is your inspiration? Because I know you said that you was the first person to really get into that. Do you have any inspiration?
My big inspiration was just that honestly, my dad took me fishing a couple times, and I'm a type of person where it's like I can't just have a hobby and be average at something. If I'm going to do something, I have to be like the best into it, and I have to like really get into it. So I really started to get into it, and I looked at like Brandon Polinick, who's a pro from Coeur d'Alene here. He fishes in the Major League Fishing and the Bassmaster Classic, and he's one of the most successful fishermen from the area. So I've looked up to him a lot to get into it more, and then just meeting other people in the community, like my buddy Ryan Hallsapple, who fishes in the tournaments. He kind of shows me around, and it's just kind of talking and doing is what really motivates me and keeps me going. Any other questions?